My name is Violet, and I am a 36-year-old woman who has spent the last 7 years working at the National Archives and Records Administration. This job has always been fulfilling for me, offering a daily immersion into significant historical documents and artifacts. However, recently I've begun to feel a void in my life. I lost my parents in a tragic car accident when I was in my early 20s, a loss that left me profoundly alone. Since then, I have buried myself in my work, attempting to ignore the deep-seated loneliness that quietly gnaws at me. As my mid-30s approached, the desire for more personal connection became undeniable. I longed for a family of my own. One day, as we celebrated a colleague's birthday, my coworker Sophia invited me to join everyone in the break room. Amidst the festive atmosphere, I observed Sophia sneak peeks at her phone, likely messaging her husband. A twinge of envy struck me as I watched my peers enjoying their personal interactions. William, who was celebrating his birthday, offered me a piece of cake and jokingly suggested setting me up with his nephew, noticing my single status. I appreciated the gesture but smiled and declined politely. Despite several setups and casual dates, none seemed to align with what I was looking for, someone who prioritized family and offered stability. Later that day, as I sorted through files, my supervisor, Mr. David, approached me with a new assignment. A farmer from upstate, interested in acquiring an abandoned neighboring plot, needed our help. Intrigued by the prospect of such a unique client, I eagerly accepted the task. The next morning, I made sure to arrive at work early, taking extra care of my appearance. Despite trying to downplay the significance of the day, Sophia playfully commented on my efforts. Just as we were talking, Mr. David introduced me to our new client, Jonathan. Contrary to my expectations of an elderly, rugged farmer, Jonathan was a man in his early 40s with salt and pepper hair, dressed casually yet sharply in jeans and a plaid shirt. "Please call me Jonathan," he said with a warm, engaging smile, extending a hand weathered from physical labor. His firm handshake sparked an unexpected flutter in my stomach, but I composed myself and invited him to discuss his project. As we sat down, his presence, marked by a quiet confidence, seemed to command the room. Jonathan was eager to expand his farm and envisioned planting an orchard on the adjacent land. As he spoke about his plans, his enthusiasm was palpable, and his eyes sparkled with ambition. This conversation marked the beginning of not just a professional relationship, but a personal connection that promised to grow just as fruitfully as the orchard he hoped to cultivate. As Jonathan talked about needing to find the owners of the property, his passion was evident, and it immediately captivated me. His enthusiasm for his work was refreshing and infectious. We spent several hours together, diving into ancient property records. Jonathan proved to be exceptionally knowledgeable, asking sharp questions that streamlined our search significantly. As we worked, our conversation flowed naturally. "So, how long have you been farming?" I asked during a quiet moment. Jonathan's expression softened. "Born and raised on a farm. Took it over from my dad about 53 years ago. It's challenging, but I wouldn't have it any other way." There was a hint of something deeper in his voice that piqued my curiosity. "It sounds like there's a story behind that," I remarked. He paused, seeming to decide how much to share. "Well, it's just me and my boys now. My wife, she passed away a few years back." My heart tightened in empathy. "I'm so sorry, Jonathan. That must be incredibly tough." He nodded, managing a sad smile. "It is. But my boys, they keep me going. They're 6 great kids." A wave of sympathy washed over me. "I lost my parents years ago. I know it's not the same, but I understand the weight of loss." The rest of the day flew by as we made substantial progress with the property search. However, it was clear we needed more time. As Jonathan was leaving, he turned back hesitantly. "Listen, Violet, I know this might be unconventional, but would you like to grab a coffee sometime to discuss the case more?" My heart fluttered. "I'd like that, Jonathan. For the case, of course." Over the next few weeks, Jonathan and I met regularly, ostensibly focusing on the property case. However, our discussions often ventured beyond land records and legal documents. I found myself opening up to him more than I had with anyone else in a long time. One day, as we wrapped up our session, Jonathan hesitated. "Violet, I hope I'm not overstepping, but would you like to come out to the farm this weekend? The boys and I are having a little barbecue. Nothing fancy." Excitement mixed with nerves at the invitation. "I'd love to, Jonathan. Are you sure the boys would be okay with it?" He smiled, his eyes crinkling warmly. "They've been asking to meet you. I might have mentioned you once or twice." That Saturday, I drove out to Jonathan's farm, watching the city landscape give way to rolling hills and open fields. As I pulled up to the farmhouse, I saw Jonathan and two young boys waiting on the porch. "Violet," Jonathan called out, beckoning me over. Stepping out of my car, I felt a flutter of nerves. The younger boy shyly hid behind Jonathan's leg, while the older one looked at me with curiosity. "Boys, this is Miss Violet from the archives," Jonathan introduced. "And Violet, these are my sons, Colton and Liam." Colton, the older boy, stepped forward. "Do you work with old stuff all day? That's cool." I chuckled, feeling more at ease. "I do. Maybe I can show you some interesting documents sometime." Liam, still a bit shy, peeked out from behind Jonathan. "Do you like chickens?" "We have chickens." And just like that, any awkwardness melted away. The boys took me on a tour of the farm, showing me their favorite spots and introducing me to various animals. Jonathan trailed behind, his soft smile ever present. As the day unfolded, I seamlessly blended into the rhythm of life with Jonathan and his boys. We grilled burgers, played catch in the yard, and ended the evening roasting marshmallows over a fire. As the boys drifted to sleep on a nearby blanket, Jonathan and I sat under the stars in comfortable silence. "Thank you for today," I said softly, grateful for the unexpected connection and the warmth of a newfound family. As Jonathan turned to me, his expression earnest, he spoke candidly. "Violet, I need to be upfront with you. I like you, and I feel you might have similar feelings. But you must know my sons, and I come as a full package. Being a single dad and managing the farm isn't always simple." Taking a deep breath, I gather my thoughts before responding. "Jonathan, I have feelings for you too, and your boys are wonderful. It won't be simple, but I'm eager to see where this journey leads us if you are." Jonathan's face lit up with a joyful smile as he took my hand gently. "I'd like that very much, Violet." The following months felt like living a dream. Jonathan and I became closer, and I found myself spending increasing amounts of time at the farm. His boys, Colton and Liam, quickly took to me, awakening a maternal side I hadn't known existed. One chilly autumn evening, as we watched the sunset from the porch, Jonathan looked at me with a grave yet hopeful expression. "Violet, these last 7 months have been the happiest I've had in years. It might seem quick, but when it feels right, it just does. Violet Thompson, will you marry me?" Tears filled my eyes as I answered without hesitation. "Yes, Jonathan, I will marry you." Our wedding was a modest celebration on the farm, surrounded by close friends and family. Dressed in a simple white gown, I walked towards Jonathan, who looked dashing in his suit, with Colton and Liam grinning at his side. However, my joy waned slightly when I overheard a comment from Jonathan's mother during the reception. "She's awfully slender, isn't she? I'm not sure she's suited for farm life," she muttered. "Give her time, Lainey," Jonathan's father reassured. "She'll either toughen up or break." I tried to dismiss their words, focusing on the joy of the day, but a seed of doubt had been planted. After our honeymoon, I moved permanently to the farm, a significant change from my job and city life. Jonathan proposed I quit working to focus on the home and children, and I eagerly accepted, ready to embrace my new roles as wife and stepmother. Initially, everything seemed perfect. I immersed myself in farm life, learning to cook substantial meals, maintain the vegetable garden, and assist with lighter farm tasks. The boys flourished under my care, and I cherished reading to them at night and helping with their homework. However, as time passed, the charm began to wane. The labor was relentless and physically demanding. I hadn't anticipated the extent of effort required to run a farm. My hands, once delicate from office work, grew calloused and rough. Jonathan's parents, who lived nearby, were frequent visitors. His mother, Lainey, seized every chance to critique my efforts. "You call this a proper farm breakfast?" She'd scoff at my cooking attempts. In my day, we have had 3 kinds of meat on the table by now. I tried to shrug off her remarks, but they stung. Jonathan, preoccupied with the farm, seemed unaware of my difficulties. One tough day, as I struggled to guide a stubborn cow into the barn, Jonathan shouted from his tractor, "Come on, Violet, put your back into it. Food doesn't just appear on the table, you know?" I suppressed a retort, feeling a mixture of frustration and hurt. That evening, as I looked at myself in the mirror, the reflection of the woman staring back was almost unrecognizable. This was not the life I had envisioned when I said, "I do." I had lost weight, my hair was a mess, and dark circles had taken permanent residence under my eyes. The polished nails and perfectly styled hair of my previous city life now seemed like distant memories. As the months passed, the relentless demands of farm life began to overwhelm me. Every morning, I was up before dawn, cooking breakfast for Jonathan and the boys, packing their lunches, and then plunging into a never-ending list of chores, feeding animals, cleaning coops and stalls, and assisting with the crops. One particularly taxing day, I woke up feeling miserable. My head throbbed painfully, and I could feel the fever brewing. But even as I considered the impossibility of taking a sick day, after all, to whom would I report my absence? A sharp knock came at my bedroom door. "Violet, are you planning to sleep all day?" It was Lainey, my mother-in-law. With a groan, I forced myself to sit up. "I'm not feeling well, Lainey. I think I might have a fever." She burst into the room, her expression stern. "Nonsense. In this family, only death is an excuse not to work. Now get up and make me some breakfast. Then there's work to be done in the yard." Stunned and too weak to argue, I dragged myself out of bed. As I mechanically prepared Lainey's breakfast, each movement was a protest from my body. "Here you go," I said, setting a plate of overcooked eggs and bacon in front of her. She took one bite, grimaced, and said, "Overcooked, but it'll have to do. Now get out there and earn your keep." I stumbled outside, my vision blurry and my body aching. The world seemed to spin as I made my way to the chicken coop. As I bent down to clean it out, a wave of nausea overwhelmed me. I barely managed to escape the coop before vomiting. Wiping my mouth, I looked up to see Jonathan watching from his tractor. "You okay?" he called out. I shook my head weakly. "I think I'm sick, Jonathan. I need to lie down." He frowned. "We can't afford for you to be sick right now, Violet. The work needs to get done. Just push through it." Tears stung my eyes as he turned back to his work. I felt so alone, so unsupported. This wasn't the man I had fallen in love with. That night, as I lay in bed with my fever raging, it was Colton and Liam who cared for me. They brought me water and cold compresses, their young faces lined with concern. "Are you going to be okay, Violet?" Liam asked, his voice small. I managed a weak smile. "I'll be fine, sweetheart. Thank you for taking care of me." As the boys left the room, I heard Jonathan's voice in the hallway. "Boys, leave Violet alone. She needs to rest so she can get back to work tomorrow." At that moment, something inside me snapped. This wasn't the life I wanted. This wasn't the family I had dreamed of. I knew I needed to make a change. Just as I resolved to do so, life threw me another curveball. A few weeks later, as I was steeling myself for another grueling day, a wave of nausea hit me again, but this time, it wasn't due to illness. With trembling hands, I took a pregnancy test. As I waited for the results, my mind raced with thoughts of a baby. How could I handle a newborn on top of everything else? When the test showed positive, I felt a tumultuous mix of joy and terror. I had hoped for some respite from the relentless farm work, but now, facing the reality of a new life growing inside me, I was unsure and scared. How would I manage this new challenge in an already demanding life? The following morning, with their departure still hanging in the cool air, I mustered every ounce of resolve. I called to the boys, my voice clear and more determined than I felt. "Colton, Liam, grab your essentials, anything you hold dear. We didn't have much time. As they scurried around, gathering their belongings, I hastily packed a small suitcase for Hazel and another for myself. My mind raced as I planned our escape from the life that had become our prison. This was not just a fleeting decision spurred by fear, but a necessary act propelled by the desire to protect my children and myself from a repeating cycle of despair and disregard. We left quietly, the farm's vast fields stretching out like a patchwork quilt made of sorrows and toils. The boys, aware yet confused, trusted my lead as we drove away from the only life they knew with their father. As the farmhouse faded into the distance, a sense of liberation mixed with an overwhelming fear of the unknown began to settle in. My thoughts were a tangled mess of hope and worry, hope for a new beginning and worry about the repercussions of our sudden departure. We headed towards the nearest town, where I planned to seek shelter and assistance. The drive was silent, each of us lost in our thoughts, contemplating the gravity of our escape. Upon reaching the town, I contacted a women's shelter, explaining our situation. They welcomed us with open arms and the promise of safety. As I watched Colton and Liam play quietly in the corner of the room provided to us, a deep sense of relief washed over me. We had escaped the suffocating hold of the farm, but the road ahead was uncertain. The shelter offered legal aid to help us navigate the forthcoming challenges, and counseling to aid the boys and me in processing the trauma and upheaval of our lives. That night, as I lay beside Hazel in a bed not our own, I pondered our future. The decision to leave was fraught with uncertainty, but the alternative, the risk of fading into oblivion under the harsh demands of farm life, was far worse. As I drifted into a restless sleep, I clung to the hope that one day, we would all look back on this moment not just as an escape, but as the first step towards a truly new life, one where we could thrive, not just survive. As the boy hastily packed his things, I gathered essentials for Hazel and a few personal items for myself. Among these, I carefully retrieved Elizabeth's diary, placing it securely in my bag. Within an hour, we were in my old car, leaving the farm behind. The boys sat in silence, a somber mood settling over them as they sensed the significance of our departure. Hazel, oblivious to the changes, slept peacefully in her car seat. Using the little savings I had, I rented a small apartment in the city. It was a tight fit compared to the spaciousness of the farmhouse, but it was ours, a safe haven. The next day, I reached out to some old contacts at the archive where I used to work. They were surprised to hear from me, but were immediately supportive. With their help, I located information about Elizabeth's parents. With trembling hands, I dialed the number and was greeted by a warm, elderly voice. "Hello, Mrs. David, this is Violet. I was married to your son-in-law, Jonathan." After a brief pause and a sharp intake of breath, she replied, "Is everything all right? We've been trying to contact the boys for years. Jonathan cut us off after we lost Elizabeth. Can we see them?" It turned out the Davids lived nearby, in a neighboring town. They eagerly invited us over, anxious to reconnect with their grandchildren and to meet Hazel. As soon as we arrived at their home, a wave of warmth and acceptance washed over us. Elizabeth's parents, Scarlett and Michael, greeted us with open arms and tear-filled eyes. "Oh, look at you all," Scarlett exclaimed, embracing Colton and Liam tightly. Michael gently took Hazel from my arms, cradling her with the ease of a grandfather. Once we settled inside, I knew it was time. With shaking hands, I produced Elizabeth's diary from my bag. "There's something you need to see," I said softly, handing the diary to Scarlett. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to horror and then to grief as they read. Tears streamed down Scarlett's face, while Michael clenched his jaw in anger. "We knew something was wrong," Scarlett whispered, "but we never imagined." "Oh, Elizabeth." Just then my phone rang. It was Jonathan. I steeled myself and answered. "Where the hell are you?" he growled. "Get back home now, or I'm calling the police." I felt a surge of courage. "No, Jonathan, I'm not coming back. In fact, I'll be the one contacting the police. Don't call me again." I hung up, my heart racing. Over the next few days, with the David support, I put our plan into motion. I contacted Child Protective Services, providing detailed accounts of the abuse and neglect the children had suffered. Then, clutching Elizabeth's diary, I walked into the local police station. The detective listened gravely as I recounted everything: the forced labor, the medical neglect, Elizabeth's suicide. "This is extremely serious," he said. "We'll need to investigate thoroughly. Are you willing to press charges?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. For all of us. What followed was a whirlwind of activity. Jonathan and his parents were arrested and brought in for questioning. The farm was searched, and more evidence of abuse was uncovered. The boys were interviewed by child psychologists, bravely recounting their experiences. It was heart-wrenching to hear their stories, but I was so proud of their courage. Finally, after months of legal proceedings, we found ourselves in the courtroom for the final verdict. I sat between Scarlett and Michael, holding Hazel close, with Colton and Liam by our sides. The judge's voice rang out clearly. "In light of the overwhelming evidence, this court finds the defendants guilty of child abuse, neglect, labor exploitation, and criminally negligent homicide in the death of Elizabeth David." I heard Scarlett's sharp intake of breath beside me. The judge continued, "Jonathan is sentenced to 12 years in prison. His parents, Lainey and Nathan, are each sentenced to 9 years. As the gavel came down, I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, vindication, sadness, and hope. This was a new beginning for us, a chance to rebuild and heal from the shadows of the past. As I watched the boys after the trial, I could see a tangible relief in their expressions. The ordeal had lifted a heavy burden from their young shoulders, and our lives began to reshape into something new and hopeful. Elizabeth's parents, Scarlett and Michael, were nothing short of a blessing. They opened their home to us, providing a stable and loving environment as we navigated the turbulent waters of our new reality. "Your family now, Violet," Scarlett would often say, her voice warm and inviting as we sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the children play in the yard. The support from Scarlett and Michael was steadfast. They were there through the endless court dates and lawyer meetings, offering not just emotional support, but practical help. Michael took Colton and Liam fishing on the weekends, allowing them to just be kids, escaping the shadows of the past for a while. Scarlett doted on baby Hazel, often singing her the same lullabies she had once sung to Elizabeth, filling our new days with sweet melodies. Encouraged by them, I hired a skilled divorce lawyer, and the Davids, ever generous, insisted on covering the legal fees. The divorce from Jonathan was straightforward, thanks to his incarceration, and it concluded with me gaining full custody of the children and a substantial portion of Jonathan's assets for their support. As grateful as I was for the Davids' hospitality, I felt it was time for us to stand on our own. With part of the settlement, I rented a comfortable apartment in the city, close to my old job at the National Archives and a reputable school for the kids. Walking back into the archives felt like a homecoming. My colleagues welcomed me with open arms, and my boss offered a flexible schedule to accommodate my new responsibilities as a single mother. Enrolling Colton and Liam back in school was a bittersweet milestone. They were excited yet nervous, having been away from formal education for some time. Hazel began attending a nearby daycare. I still remember the lump in my throat watching them head off on their first day, their backpacks looking oversized on their small backs. Scarlett and Michael continued to be a vital part of our lives, visiting often. Their presence was a constant reminder of the family we had become. They treated all 3 children with equal love, offering the grandparental affection they had been unjustly denied for too long. One Sunday, as we relaxed in the living room after a hearty family lunch, Michael cleared his throat, looking slightly nervous. "Violet, Scarlett, and I have been talking," he began. "We've updated our will. We want you and the kids to be taken care of, no matter what happens." I was speechless, but Scarlett squeezed my hand reassuringly. "You're our daughter now, Violet," she said softly, "and those are our grandchildren. We want to make it official." Tears welled up in my eyes as the full weight of their words hit me. This was what family was meant to be, a circle of unconditional love and unwavering support. As I looked around at the smiling faces of my children and these two incredible individuals who had embraced us so fully, a profound sense of peace settled over me. We were truly home, surrounded by love that knew no bounds.